Hello everyone and welcome to Then and Now. This is a show where history meets the headlines and we talk about how modern issues echo historical ones. I'm your host Denny, and today we're diving into a topic as old as power itself, the public fallout between leaders and their once loyal right-hand men. From the halls of Washington to the courts of Paris and on through medieval times, there's a pattern we can't ignore. When ideas clash and loyalties fracture, the consequences ripple through history and can have lasting consequences. Today, we're starting in the present, and we're talking about the fallout between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Not long ago, it looked like the US President, Donald Trump, and tech giant Elon Musk were a winning team. They were here to make lasting and meaningful changes. Musk was seen as a tech genius shaking up industries, while President Trump was busy shaking up Washington. There were moments of mutual admiration. Trump welcomed Musk to advisory councils. Musk publicly opposed government overreach, and they both agreed on deregulation, on business freedom, and maybe even they had a disdain for traditional gatekeepers. But that didn't last. The fallout became crystal clear when Musk began criticizing the big, beautiful bill. He encouraged people to go against it, and he has even been critical of those who support it. He even became personal, saying that the president will last only 3.5 years, but he, Musk, is going to be around for 40 years. President Trump, in the meantime, is in no hurry to talk to Musk, and it has been reported that he commented that Musk has lost his mind. The public is watching it all unfold. Two colossal figures who were briefly aligned now clearly at odds. It's a very modern drama, but the pattern is ancient. Let's rewind a few centuries and talk about a few empire builders who likewise had political fallouts in the public eye with their former close companions. Our first leader is somebody you might know. He is King Henry II of England. This is a big one, a very big one. King Henry is quite possibly one of the most powerful and forward-thinking kings to ever rule England. He was not afraid to promote people to serve in his government who were not necessarily of noble birth, but they proved themselves to be competent and capable. One such person that he promoted was a gentleman called Thomas Becket. The thing is, though, that Thomas wasn't just a good worker, he was also a very close friend to the king. By all accounts, the two were what you would call bosom buddies. They went hunting, drinking, and generally carousing together. Now, King Henry was someone who, as I said before, he was forward-thinking, and he believed that as a king, he should have the obedience and the control of all his subjects. But this wasn't the case. He couldn't control the clergy. The clergy class answered only to the church in Rome. So if a priest committed a crime, the king couldn't bring him to justice. And believe it or not, priests back in those times, they were making their fair share of mischief. And this irked Henry. So when the Archbishop of Canterbury died, Henry saw his opportunity to bring the church under his control. How was he going to do this? Well, all he had to do was appoint his good friend Thomas Becket to be the Archbishop of Canterbury. Voila, problem solved, right? Wrong. Thomas Becket rebelled and disagreed with Henry on his plan to control the church. He, in effect, did all that Henry did not want him to do. They argued and fought, and Becket even excommunicated some of Henry's supporters. One night in anger, the king said, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" or something to that effect. 4 of his knights who were sitting nearby heard his exclamation and took it upon themselves to kill Thomas. This was a mistake. Historians argue whether this was a command from the king himself to kill Thomas, or perhaps it was a misunderstanding on the part of the knights. Whatever the case, there was public outcry against the king. He was branded a priest killer. He had to do penance for his role in the murder by walking barefoot and enduring a brutal whipping. The king, imagine him, the king being punished for the death of Thomas Becket. Thomas, well, he was elevated by the Pope to the level of sainthood, and he became Saint Thomas Becket. Wasn't that something? Let's now move on to our second story of political fallout. Now, this person I know you know, Napoleon Bonaparte. He was a military genius, a man who crowned himself emperor and redrew the map of Europe. But no emperor stands alone. One of his most cunning political advisors was Charles Maurice Talleyrand, France's diplomatic mastermind. Allow me please to tell you a little bit about Talleyrand, so we will know about the man and what part he played in Napoleon's downfall. Talleyrand was actually born in 1754 into a distinguished family. He became a churchman, receiving a degree in theology. He moved through the clerical ranks, becoming a deacon, a priest, and then a bishop. Despite his rise in religious orders, his private life didn't mirror his public persona. He was a frequent visitor to the salons, and the salons back then weren't necessarily bawdy places. These were places where people would gather and talk about current issues, political matters. It was a place of thinking and discussion and that sort of a thing. But he loved the salons, and he was also a great seducer of women. Finally, he gave up his priestly vows. Then the French Revolution came. Now, there was a period of little over a year during the Revolution, which was known as the Reign of Terror. During this period, people who were of noble birth were rounded up and executed. Talleyrand, for his part, he fled the country. For a little bit, he lived in the United States, but he didn't like it. He said the weather was bad, there was no culture, and the food was bad. So finally, in 1796, he was allowed to return to France. In 1799, he joined a conspiracy to bring General Napoleon Bonaparte to power. For his loyal support of Napoleon, he was made foreign minister, and he helped to stabilize the post-revolutionary France. He negotiated treaties, formed alliances, and soothed monarchies that were unnerved by Napoleon's rise and rapid military successes. Perhaps Talleyrand's most outstanding achievement was the signing of the Peace of Amiens. This was a treaty that saw Britain acknowledging that the Netherlands, parts of the Rhine, and Italy were all under French control. All the years of war had paid off, and Talleyrand was satisfied that France was now a force to be reckoned with in Europe. But Napoleon wasn't done. He wanted more, and this is where things get interesting. Napoleon wanted more glory, he wanted more land, more battles, more dominance. But Talleyrand wanted stability. He saw Napoleon's obsession with war as a danger not just to France, but to Europe. So he turned. He turned quietly and strategically against Napoleon. Talleyrand began secretly negotiating with Napoleon's enemies like Austria, Russia, and Prussia, while he was still technically in Napoleon's service. What he did laid the groundwork for Napoleon's downfall. When Napoleon found out about Talleyrand's betrayal, he exploded, and it is recorded that he famously called Talleyrand a piece of dung in silk stockings. A brutal insult, but it was too late. The bond was broken, and when Napoleon finally did fall, Talleyrand was still standing, serving the restored Bourbon monarchy. Here we see something chilling. The right-hand man who turns not out of vengeance, but calculation. Their ideologies were no longer aligned to that of their leader, and this can be a dangerous thing. Now let's shift a little bit to the United States of America. We are in the period of the Civil War. This was a different kind of fallout, and of course the stakes were very different. We're talking about President Abraham Lincoln and his general George McClellan. Abraham Lincoln is remembered as the steady moral leader who held the fractured nation together. But during the Civil War, his greatest challenge wasn't the Confederacy. It was his own general, Chief George McClellan. McClellan was smart, charismatic, and loved by his troops. But on the battlefield, he was cautious to a fault. He hesitated, he delayed, and he even failed to pursue the enemy at times. Lincoln begged him to move faster, to act more boldly. There was war, and it was bleeding the country dry, and McClellan's delays were costing lives. But McClellan was arrogant and openly contemptuous of political figures. And he had no respect for Lincoln, which is a very bad thing. He is also said to have referred to Lincoln as a well-meaning baboon. Things came to a head on November 13 when President Lincoln and two other officials went to McClellan's house to talk about war strategy. It wasn't unusual for the president to stop by McClellan's house, for war discussions. However, on this particular evening, McClellan was not at home. No worries, the president and his companions decided to wait. They waited and waited and waited. After 1.5 hours, he and his companions were informed that McClellan had come home half an hour ago, and he had gone to bed. This was despite being told that the president was there to see him. Of course, President Lincoln left the house. He never went back, and he removed McClellan from his post as general-in-chief. But here's the kicker. McClellan didn't go quietly. He made a comeback, this time as a political rival to Lincoln. In 1864, McClellan decided to run against Lincoln for the presidency on the platform of peace with the South. In other words, he was willing to let the Confederacy have their way despite the cost of the war. Lincoln, of course, beat him decisively. But imagine the tension. A commander once entrusted with the fate of the Union, now trying to unseat the very man who gave him that kind of trust. These examples show that there is nothing new under the sun. Where Napoleon and Trump were betrayed by cunning people, Lincoln faced a subtler form of opposition. McClellan wasn't treacherous. He simply didn't share Lincoln's urgency or resolve. And that too is a kind of fracture. It's almost just as bad. So what do these stories of Trump and Musk, King Henry and Thomas Becket, Napoleon and Talleyrand, Lincoln and McClellan, what do they all have in common? They each reveal that no leader rules alone and that no alliance is guaranteed. In every case, the public fallout exposed deep differences that were often there all along, simmering just beneath the surface. And perhaps most importantly, these fractures remind us that loyalty in leadership is never absolute. It's conditional, it's strategic, and sometimes it's temporary. So the next time you see two powerful allies fall out, whether in politics, tech, or in the business world, look closer. It's not just personal, it's philosophical, it's strategic, and it's often a sign that the real power struggle has just begun. Thanks so much for joining me on Then and Now. If you enjoyed today's episode, subscribe and leave me a comment. Let me know if there's any news item you have seen that you would like us to discuss in its historical context. Until next time, I'm Denny, reminding you that history isn't just behind us, it's all around us. Until next time, take good care.